How does a family really empower themselves to understand the different titles and the different positions of folks who can help?
What are ways that families can actually know that the professional that they're working with is someone that they can trust?
You approach older adults in a way that you would want your loved ones to be cared for.
Welcome to the Empowered Elder Podcast.
More than 53 million Americans are unpaid family caregivers, many juggling careers, children, and complex medical decisions. And they're navigating a system that can feel overwhelming and fragmented.
The stakes are high. Older adults lose billions each year to fraud and financial exploitation. When families don't understand credentials, roles, or rights, it leaves room for costly mistakes.
Joining us is Kelly O'Connor, editor of the CSA Journal and vice president of strategic partnerships for the Society of Certified Senior Advisors. Her work focuses on strengthening professional standards and helping families identify qualified, ethical support.
If you've ever wondered who to trust or how to confidently advocate for someone you love, this conversation is certainly for you.
Let's get started. So let's start with just a general introduction, who are you? What do you do? All of those lovely kind of things.
Okay. Well, so I'm Kelly O'Connor, as you know, and I'm a certified senior advisor. I've been working in the senior space for about 16 years, and I've worked in various different capacities. And now I'm working with the Society of Certified Senior Advisors, which is a national membership organization of people that have really gone the extra distance to become experts in what it means to age in our country.
Fantastic. What brought you originally into the senior space?
So when I was in my 20s, my mom had breast cancer. And we had two grandmothers that lived with us at the time. And so it threw the entire family system, as you can imagine, into a complete chaos. And so I was taking care of my grandmothers, taking care of my mom, working with my dad and my brothers to make sure that the family stayed in its structure and worked together. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs, so we had to make sure the businesses were running. And I mean, it was really a difficult time. And I was 23 when my mother got sick. And so she passed away 4.5 years later. And I said, one day I'm going to volunteer. I think that's what I'm going to do with my time. I'm going to volunteer at hospice and help and give back to families the way that the hospice volunteers gave to our family. So it was just one of those things that I put in a little checkbox, that one day I'm going to do this. And so I went on to catch up with my friends in my career. I worked in fashion marketing and entertainment marketing and did that for many years. And then I came to sort of a crossroads in life and I thought, hey, maybe it's time to tick that checkbox. Maybe I should actually volunteer now. And so I did that with hospice. And I had someone that came up to me and said, you've got a knack for this. And I thought, a knack for what? And it was, I really think, an angel in my life who just came to me and just said, you've got something special that could really support people in this later life and end of life space. Would you be interested in being in our industry? And I just took the invitation and said yes.
Sometimes it takes somebody else to bring something and highlight something. You're like, hey, wait, I can do this. This would be pretty amazing. I would be good at it. So it seemed like the timing and the question that came to you, it all made sense, right?
Yep, it did.
That's cool.
And I had walked through, lots of things with my mom and in that experience and helping make decisions. I was not the executor of her estate, but I was involved in making some of the decisions that needed to be made and going through that, which you both know so well. And it was a lot for a 20, I was 28 when my mom died, but to go through all of that. And then I held responsibilities for both of my grandmothers at the time. So I was able to walk through those experiences. And then my dad later had Parkinson's and I was able to walk through that experience with him. And I was 45 And I was the oldest person in my family. And I thought, my goodness, how did all this happen? This could not have been by accident. And luckily there was people that saw in me something that I couldn't see for myself. And I thought senior care was just for people that were nurses. I thought I had a medical model in my mind and not a lifestyle model. And that was one of the big shifts that really opened my eyes and really gave me inspiration for what later life could be like.
Well, in living through it, you knew the real life experience to draw from for questions to ask and answers to find and what research to do, right?
Correct.
It's not just book learning.
No.
You had the true experience of learning.
Yes. And what's interesting is, as the years have gone by, I've realized that every family is so different. And every situation is so different. So it really does take someone really skilled to be able to ask the right questions to find out what the real problem is, and then to be able to find the right solutions for that particular family. And so it really does take someone who's really skilled. It's not something you can learn from a book, and it's not something you can learn in a year. It is something that really does take time to really hone those skills and be able to serve older adults and their families with the level of excellence and dignity that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's such a complex system when a family member is entering into the space elder care system, and there's so many moving parts and pieces. Could be after a diagnosis, could be after a fall, or maybe there's a sudden change that happens. What would you say is the moment that tends to wake people up to realize just how complex it is and how important it is to have somebody by your side that can help you maneuver through that space?
It is the crisis. And I wish it wasn't, but that's the answer, is it is the crisis. Whether it's a fall and I've broken a hip. I had a personal friend who ran into a situation where their mother was financially scammed, and it became an awareness to the family. Once they found out about it, then all of a sudden they're like, we need to make some different decisions. And so it's usually some sort of crisis that happens. Many times we find people that are older adults that are coupled. One has some cognitive concerns and one will have some physical concerns. And then when one of them passes away or becomes incapacitated in some way, the other one is left to fend for themselves. So it's really difficult for a family to come in and take care of one person, and then they realize, oh my goodness, the other parent is the one that needs the attention more so than we thought. And so what do we do, and how do we make those decisions?
And those family members are already taking care of their family. So they have a family that they're trying to help, and now they've got this additional situation or additional family care that they have to step into in that role, right?
Yep.
It's pretty complex, right?
It gets complex really, really fast.
As with your experience, as you have seen families kind of go through the transition and the learning process and all of that, is there a typical spot that they get this aha of, I have to advocate. I have to be my own advocate. I have to advocate for my family. Like, I'm in control in this uncontrollable kind of scenario. Mm-hmm. Is there a point in time that generally comes into play?
Usually it comes into play in a hospitalization or when someone goes to physical rehab. And it's once they start to see how someone is cared for in a hospital setting or a rehab setting and the disconnect that happens. When the doctor says, I'll be right there, and you wait 4 hours for the doctor to show up. And it's like, wait a minute, we needed help and support years ago. It's like, we needed help and support. I'll say that again, but we needed help and support hours ago. We don't need the help and support later. We need it in the moment when we're having the crisis and when we're all there. Because how do you take time off from your work, take time off away from your family to take care of an older adult? And when do you do that is the other question. When is the time to step in?
Mm-hmm. Well, and as a family member that has experienced some of that myself, it's really hard to know what questions to ask to get the answers that you need, right? And so working with someone who has that background is imperative in some instances, or in many instances.
In many instances, it is. And that, I think, is really important, because if there's someone who's been, let's call them a case manager, a geriatric care manager, an elder care consultant, someone like that is familiar with the hospital system, and that's maybe even knows the people that are the social workers and the discharge planners, that they can actually have a personal relationship with, that they can knock on the door and say, hey, Susie, the family's been waiting for you. What can we do? What do we need to do? How do we set this up so that they can be discharged and be successful once they go home? It takes a lot to learn those advocacy skills. And some people just go with the system because we think that the system is going to take care of us. But many times it does take that really intentioned supporter to be able to step in and ask some questions, especially when someone's really not feeling too well, either in hospital or rehab.
And there are many professionals in this space, and a family member or someone might feel, well, this professional is kind. They must be, they respond to me when I call, or somebody may have recommended. But is that enough to know if somebody's just kind? Mm-hmm. Like, what are ways that families can actually know that the professional that they're working with is someone that they can trust and is going to be putting the family's interest first? Like, how can a family member know who they're working with is somebody that can be trusted?
Yeah, that is really difficult. And it's also difficult when you're in crisis and you have to make decisions quickly. And a lot of these professions in the senior care business are popping up. So we're seeing, as the baby boomers are aging, and as the Gen Xers, I'm a proud Gen Xer, as we're, approaching 60, and it's what do we do? And these professions are just sort of popping up, and how do we take care of everyone? And the states are very slow to have laws and certifications and licensures and so forth. They're slow to see this, but you're starting to see things pop up where people are being licensed. With the Society of Certified Senior Advisors, what I love about our organization is anyone that works with us has passed a rigorous exam. They are background checked. They have signed a code of professional responsibility, and they've passed an ethics module, and they have continuing education that they are needing every 3 years, and they're continually background checked. And so that's one thing that families can do, is really see, is someone licensed? Are they licensed in good standing? If they're not licensed, what kind of certification did they have? Was it a one-day course that they took for 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, and have a certificate for the wall? Or is this something that they really went through and invested time and money and the certification and sign that code? I think that's one thing that's really, really important, that I have not only am an expert in my industry, but I've also signed a code of professional responsibility on how I'll treat my clients and how I will run my business. That says a lot.
Right, for sure.
In the CSA certification process, there's so many different people with so many different titles, right? Care managers, case managers. In my class, I met someone from AARP. How does a family really empower themselves to understand the different titles and the different positions of folks who can help? Because there's so many moving parts. It's not just a one-stop shop.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what's really hard, because one person can come into a family situation and can only help you so far. And then what do you do? And so finding someone that is sort of the cog in the wheel, that has all the resources that are available, that they can say, okay, I've reached sort of the end of where I can serve you inside my ethical boundaries right now. However, I know another person who is in my sphere of influence, that I can really support you in knowing that they are vetted and that they are qualified and that they can help you to this point, and then I'm going to pop back in at, let's call it point C. And so I think families really appreciate knowing that there's a container of resources and referrals for people like both of you who've been in the industry for a long time, to really support your clients with.
That's great. And would you say that what are some empowering questions that family members could ask or should ask before they're looking to hire somebody that is going to support their loved one? Are there some questions that stand out in your mind?
That's a wonderful question, because what many people will say is just like I shared. 20 years ago, I went through a family situation. Most people come into our space because they've been in a family situation where they have recognized the deficits in the market, and that there's definitely something that they can do to fulfill those needs of families. And so many good intentioned people come into the industry. So questions to ask would be, tell me about your licensure, tell me about your certification, tell me how long you've been in the industry, tell me how many families you've served, tell me some of the highlights of what you've done, tell me some of the difficult situations that you've been in and how you were able to overcome those. It's really a job interview, if you will. And it's inviting someone into a really sacred space in your life. And I think that's really important that you ask those questions. Most every person in our industry is a nice person, and they all want to serve. And so those things I think you can sort of take off the table a little bit. There is a chemistry match that's important, but really finding out if this person has the experience that you would feel comfortable having your mom taken care of, or your dad, or another loved one supported by that person.
If you were going to define it, how would a family really identify the competency and the integrity in their service providers? Not just the easy answers to the questions, but how would you define that for a family?
That's a really good question. I am in my 50s, and when I'm looking at an accountant that I want to work with, how do I make that decision? When I'm looking at a primary care physician, how do I make that decision? The tough part in working with later life is that it's usually a crisis. So you have to make these decisions quickly, and you don't have the time to do the research. And I always encourage families to have these conversations early. And when you happen to meet someone along the way, just say, okay, I met this interesting person who happens to be a care manager. Let me research and see what a care manager is, even though I don't need one today, and I may not need one for 5 years. And what sort of licensure do they need? And does this person have it? And who might they know? And let's sort of start to put together a team 5 to 10 years before you think you even need it.
Sure. I mean, when we vet out our service providers, right, we ask for, give us a list of the projects that you've done and give us maybe some referrals. Like, can we talk to some of the clients that you've had in the past? And can we ask the hard questions that maybe you didn't know to ask when you were in the process with them? Because we say it's almost more important to know who not to hire.
Yes.
Right. And just because you say you've been doing this business for a decade or more doesn't mean that you really know what you're doing. Right. So we want to vet that out. And so we encourage families to do the same thing. But it is hard. It's hard to know, okay, they're giving me an answer, but how do I test that the answer is real and not just something they want me to hear?
Yeah. And that's what I've always appreciated about you, is that you approach older adults in a way that you would want your loved ones to be cared for in that exact way, and that you're willing to ask the tough questions and have those conversations. And it's like, you may be a little bit early in your profession at this point, but, let's talk in 3 to 5 years, when you've had a little bit more experience under your belt, and then we can talk, about you serving some of our families. Mm-hmm. I really appreciate that kind of approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can smell the the falsities pretty quickly because we know the questions to ask,
Yes.
right? And that's true no matter where the audience is, right? If they're in Kansas or Oklahoma or California or wherever, we all have our ways of really vetting out the service providers that they're working with.
Yes.
Right? I may not know them personally, but I'll know them by the end of the call.
Yes.
Today's conversation reminds us that empowerment in elder care, it doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from knowing you have the right to ask better questions.
And at the heart of it all is dignity, recognizing older adults as individuals with voice, rights, and value.
We're Nicole Rabilato and Tasha Beckman, and this is the Empowered Elder Podcast, where we talk about confidence, clarity, and courage to advocate well.